Welcome to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Director and Assistant Director of Menlo College's Office of Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad, Dylan Houle and Kelly Davis, in partnership with Menlo's Content Creation Club. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. I'm your host today, Menlo College's Assistant Director of Career Services and Study Abroad, Kelly Davis. Happy to be here today with my co-host, Bianca Barros. Hey there, Bianca. She's smiling.
Hi there.
There we go.
Very happy to be here.
We have a wonderful guest today. We have Sabrina Degon, who works at Box. Sabrina, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi everyone, my name is Sabrina. I work at Box, as stated. I've been there for about a year or so. Been in the Bay Area my whole life, and so just kind of came back here after college, after moving to the Silicon Valley. Sorry, not Silicon Valley, Central Valley. So many valleys. And I'm now starting my postgraduate career in tech, so that's been really fun.
Right on. And do you want to remind us, Sabrina, what your role at Box is at the moment and what kind of work it is you do there?
Yeah, so my role is called the University Recruiting Coordinator. So university recruiting is essentially any entry-level hiring between like 0 to 2 years. So students are the market for that. And the reason I say 0 to 2 years is because when students are in school, I mean, you can't expect them to have multiple years of experience in an industry, right? So it's really about bringing in those students for internships and postgraduate work. So yeah.
Awesome. Here at Leverage Our Potential, we're really curious about career paths. Can you tell us and describe your journey from graduating from college to where you are now?
Yeah. It's definitely been a journey, very up in the air, and I've fully embraced that. It's definitely okay to have a very scrappy journey after college. We go to college with this notion that, we're going to be secured with a job. And so sometimes when that doesn't happen, people start to panic a little bit, me included a little bit. What I actually did first was travel. That's one of my big passions. And so for me, I was like, I've spent 20 years in school. Like, I definitely need to give some time back to myself. And, the workforce will be there when I come back. So I traveled for a whole month in Europe. That was very lovely. I'm glad I did that. And when I came back, I started my job hunting journey. I did the usual spray and pray, just applying to everything. But through that, I really got to learn a lot about understanding my values, what I want in a job, because I actually had kind of a flex offer with like an asset management company. So for some context, I majored in business and sociology. And so when I think about business, I think about finance and like the stock market. And so I veered that way, assuming, that was something I would be interested in. And the more I was sitting on that job offer, I was like, I don't wake up in the morning excited about the stock market. And that's okay. That's just my journey personally. But I think you discover a lot about putting so much time and thought into what's my next step, because it is a big step, and while we're young, we can switch it up every once in a while. It was really important to me to really identify with the work I'm doing, because that's what's going to get me up every day. And so that's when I looked into more like recruiting, because as I'll talk about maybe later, it matched a lot of what I was doing in school. So a lot of leadership positions, a lot of mentorship, a lot of diversity and inclusion work. So finding those similarities and things I was already using my outside time being involved in was really helpful for me. So yeah, I applied to Box. It was a pretty quick process. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I've been really lucky to just stumble upon that role at the time I did, because I can't see myself in another career, at least for now. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. It's interesting how many of us end up have in the past, we've heard many stories of people kind of
Yeah.
stumbling.
Yep.
And I think that's very lucky for us to do so, of course. But I think it also says something that there just are so many opportunities out there, and you don't really know until you have gotten into the job market and you've been looking, and there are all these different titles and whatnot. And I've said that a couple of times on different podcast episodes. So whoever's listening consistently is probably like, all right, Kelly, we get it. um,
Definitely. And the whole thing that I encourage students to do as well is like, not only are you trying to prove yourself for a role that you're really interested in getting to know, you're also like interviewing the company, right? Like you want to make sure it's a good fit for you, not just like, I know I'm fit for this, because it's so much more than the job. It's the people, it's, the company, what it stands for. So the bigger picture of it all.
Yeah, definitely. And so we are going to jump into digging into what it was you were doing when you were in college. But before that, you mentioned a little bit of travel, and I'm really curious to know what your favorite destination was in that trip.
Oh, okay. So when I went to Europe, I flew into Madrid, and then we spent New Year's in Barcelona, and then we went to Paris, and that was, I'd say, probably my favorite, only because I've always had dreams of going there. And so in high school, I was like studying French because of that. I knew my parents went there for their honeymoon when they got married. So I've always idolized about it. And so I think I just lived up to all of that like anticipation when I got there. So that was quite a dream. But I'd say maybe overall, like location wise, I really enjoyed Denmark. Probably some of the nicest international people I've ever met. So I went to Copenhagen, we went to Aarhus, we even went to Billund, which is, I hope I'm saying that right, but the hometown of like Lego, the toy. So like
Wow.
meeting like the founding family, and they're like they're organizing this new museum that's very interactive, and I was like 20 years old walking around, all these kids running around, but it was great, living up my childhood dreams. But
That's
I'd definitely say probably Denmark was the most overall great experience.
yeah, and it sounds like you got to go a couple different places in Denmark, which is more than I can say. Copenhagen, I love, and go there again in an instant. But that's really neat. So jumping back to your college days and what you were doing then.
Yeah.
So you went to the University of California and you were super engaged. You were vice president for Alpha Kappa Psi, as well as a number of different organizations, if I'm recalling correctly. Can you describe to us how those experiences impacted your career, or getting into your career, kind of going in a little bit more depth based on what you said, and talk about what other skills you ended up gaining outside of the classroom?
Oh yeah, that's a huge part. And I feel like I always say it, but I've definitely learned so much more outside the classroom than inside. And that's not to say like don't go to class, definitely go to class. Um, but in terms of, I'd say like life skills, things that I still apply to my work and my relationships every day, has definitely been super valuable in that sense. So I'm just gonna start from the beginning. Like freshman year was actually not very involved with anything. And for me, it was like, I'm here to study, get good grades, just do my job, right? And then I realized I wasn't gaining a lot of like perspective through that. And so it was time to start juggling extracurriculars and stuff like that. And a lot of it was kind of like a job hunting experience. It's like discovering what communities you want to be a part of, what projects and research opportunities you want to have like a hand in. And so I was probably in about like 6 different clubs, just attending, learning, observing, meeting people. And that to me reminds me a lot of interviewing, like figuring out like the spaces you want to be in, the people you can rely on and see as mentors. So I joined a lot of like ethnic clubs, like the Filipino American Alliance because I'm Asian American. I also hopped onto this research where we were implementing community-based theater to the city of Merced, and finding out how we can showcase like farmer stories and getting people involved. So that was interesting. It was very fun.
Super cool.
Yeah, and it was a merge of my performer side. So I've actually been performing since I was 4, and so I feel like, the different identities within myself I was trying to find in different groups and spaces. And that's always a nice connection point when you can relate to what you're doing. And then within these orgs, I started getting leadership positions. So I was treasurer at one point for the Filipino American Alliance. I was interning for a campus activities board. So all the event planning that goes on campus, like concerts and comedy shows, that was a lot of fun. And then I started getting into professionalism because I was like, okay, this school is pretty small. If you know, UC Merced is the youngest UC campus right now in the 21st century. And so I was like, there's not very much alumni to look up to. And so what can I do for myself to make sure I'm going to be a good alumni for the people after me? And so it just really dawned on me that there's no real preparation in class that shows us how to, come prepared to an interview, how to hold a conversation, how to translate, what we're doing in a cohesive and receptible way to interviewers, and how to carry yourself, all of that. And so that's when I got involved with Alpha Kappa Psi, which is a global organization that is open to all majors, and it's really to emphasize the importance of business and professionalism. And I guess I was really hooked because I started getting a lot of leadership positions within that. And so, creating workshops, finding out that I love public speaking, and then also teaching people and providing value was the huge bigger picture for me. And so just to get a full circle around this, a lot of what I stick to in college, such as mentorship. Oh, I also did a lot of mentorship. So there's a job called the Success Mentor Program, which essentially you get hired to be a mentor, and then you mentor first year students transitioning into college. And especially UC Merced, which is a very big campus for undocumented students and people in underrepresented backgrounds. They're most likely first generation students, and myself included. So really giving them, again, that mentorship, that guidance, that may be different than going to a professor, right? So doing a lot of that kind of work, I found really applicable to not just recruiting, but university recruiting. So giving people a great experience, providing them value with tangible things they can apply in their lives, and then really promoting this, entry level, diversifying the workplace, bridging these opportunities to students. So I really enjoyed what I did in college, and so it's great that I still feel in touch with a lot of those experiences and can be a helping hand to students that, may not have gotten the guidance or need a little bit of empowerment. So I hope I can be a testimony to figuring those things out.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I identify with so many things that you have said. I was also not involved in my freshman year.
Yeah.
And then once I decided to do so, I was involved in everything.
Yeah.
and we started getting hooked on things. And I'm also very interested in professionalism. And that's why I applied for a job in the career services.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find that it's very rewarding to be able to advise people in small ways. And what you're doing is it's much bigger, but it's really empowering to empower others. That's one of the things that I keep with me as a value, and that's really nice. I'm also curious to know, what is your job as a university recruiter coordinator? Do you actively work as a recruiter, or you're more on coordinating side? How does your typical day work look like?
Yeah, so I'm not a recruiter yet, so I don't do the hiring, I don't do the offer process, I don't do the interviewing.
Did
So
you just say I don't do the the onboard process? I heard the awkward process.
oh, it's an offer. Sorry, offer process.
I thought that
So
was funny.
sorry. Hopefully I'm not giving an awkward process, but a lot of what I do is I mean, in general, I'd say it's very specific to Box and in my role specifically. But bare minimum is like helping the interview process. So whether that's coordinating the interviews, reaching out to candidates, pipeline flow, so going through resumes, those are the kind of things that I help manage. But specifically at Box, I've been given the opportunity to really think about candidate experience. And we've, all experience this together with like bringing student groups to our headquarters and showing them Box, and so that's a lot of branding opportunities and really again drawing back to providing value, and so having that in-person experience, that really immersive, fulfilling, wow, like I could see myself in something like this, or like wow, Box really is a cool place to be. So thinking about like how candidate experience really leaves a lasting impression. So even if it's just these emails that I write, I feel like it helps the world go round if I'm like empowering students and answering their their job questions like, oh, what's on the roadmap for Box? What are you gonna hire for soon? And so yeah, that's a lot of what I've done here. It's actually kind of shifted a little bit, which makes Box, like other medium-sized tech companies, really scrappy. So university recruiting has essentially expanded to recruiting programming. So while we don't have just one team for university efforts now, we're using all the models that we've used to scale recruiting processes. So for example, usually one cycle recruiting is one job opens, you kick that off, you find candidates for it, and then if 5 more come up on different timelines, you have to manage each one in its own way. But we've done a lot of batch pooled hiring in university recruiting since it's pretty seasonal, and we know like, okay, students are going to apply in the fall because they want to make sure they have job offers in the spring, or like students will start applying after New Year's because they're going to graduate soon and they want a job after May, June. So in that sense, it gives us a lot of wiggle room to do more strategic hiring on like a large scale, and we've been given the opportunity to do that across recruiting now. So actually one of the cool things right now is our software engineering pooled hiring. So instead of having all these software engineering roles open up, we're now doing it all at once, which is being like really efficient on our time, the interviewer's time, the candidate's time, applying to all these different roles, and being assigned to different recruiters, and thinking more big. And so now I've actually shifted my role a little bit to supporting the candidate experience team, where I'm helping redefine what coordination is, because normally the team of recruiting coordinators are just doing interview scheduling mostly 24/7, from their 9 to 5, but now we're incorporating project work. How do I project manage this? How do I present this hypothesis to change this tool that we use for a more efficient way? And then also introducing some university opportunities. So right now we have the interns, and so I've tapped in a couple of my team members to help me with the event planning, how to retain remote interns for once. Never had that before. So like thinking more broadly about candidate experience. So I'd say my role has definitely evolved. It's definitely not the same. I'm not doing HQ tours anymore, sadly, with COVID-19. But it's given me a lot of time to think about, auditing our recruiting process and like what should be standardized, what we should do from here on out, and a lot more project management. So yeah, just lots of cool projects on the side rather than just doing interview coordination all day.
It's really interesting how this this kind of really defining moment in kind of company evolution or organization evolution, wherever you're working. It's really allowing us all, I think, to kind of expand on different skills and explore different things. So bravo to Box for keeping on those interns.
Yeah, that was such a breath of fresh air, because unfortunately so many students have, had their offers revoked, and that's just the state of the business sometimes, sadly. And Box too, I mean, we've done some cutbacks of our own, but our people are really important to us, and so if we're all remote, like, we don't see the harm in having interns being remote either. And so really making sure we're not, not being that advocate for students like we usually are. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. There's engagement both live over Zoom and offline via Slack. But it's a programming we've always been curious about, right? It's like, if we're gonna have interns, year long, how can we do this remotely? So this whole virtual programming thing is new, but something we've always been curious about. So to your point, it's given us a lot of time to rethink like what we're capable of doing, what's possible. And of course, with the constraints we have now, like, is an option we have to turn to. So thankfully it's worked, and thankfully we can keep it up.
For sure. Yeah, I think humanity is realizing just how quickly we can adapt.
Yep.
But I mean, with all of this happening, there are pros and cons to being remote, right? And one of them, I'm sure, I mean, we were lucky enough to go on one of the HQ tours just last fall, and I'm hoping that'll help happen again, in the future.
I'm gonna make sure it does.
Right on. My favorite part, well, I loved the gummy bears. Those really stood out. Great snacks at Box, but it really is very impressive headquarters. I mean, you guys had that interior designer do.
Yeah.
There was a theme on every floor. It was beautiful. It was fun. What do you miss most about being there physically in your workspace?
Oh, a lot. The first thing when I heard this question was like food in caps, like FOOD.
So you and I definitely,
and just for the listeners right now, if you don't know, Box, like other tech companies, provide free food for lunch and sometimes dinner, along with all the snacks everywhere, like excessive amount of snacks. And that's always been a big plus for me, because it's one less thing I have to worry about as someone who's going about their day. I don't have to go out during my lunch break and buy food on my own money. It's allowing me to just focus on other things. And a lot of the time that was like my work. So it was definitely very beneficial. But if we're really getting into it, besides the food, I would definitely say, the people. And Box is really big on its people, what we call Boxers. Culture is so big, and I'd say it's quite an emotional place to be at, in the sense where relationship building is really important at Box. And so one-on-ones are really important to us. And, while we have that on Zoom still, we have like 30-minute Zoom calls with people we want to stay connected with. It's really the in-betweens that kind of make the memories sometimes. So, going to each other's desks, or like, hey, like, come to the kitchen with me, get some popcorn, or hey, I need a breather, you want to walk around the block outside and get some sunshine. So I think I miss those moments the most, because it's just not the same. Like, it can be compensated for over Zoom, but not everything. So I'd say I definitely just miss being around everyone, having those spontaneous conversations about random things, usually not about work, but feeling that culture in person is a huge part.
Totally. I think there's no way we can have a spontaneous Zoom call, and a lot of lot of things
kind of scheduled now.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to figure out how we can, to be honest. I'm like, how can I? There's got to be a way.
And I totally miss that as well. Just like as a student. It's a part of like being on campus
Yep. Yep.
and being able to just like knock on somebody's door because we all live together,
Yeah.
and it's crazy. And you mentioned that you guys are adapting really quickly and to
Mm,
put all the interns on board in their remote work. And what about yourself? Like, how are you coping with
mm,
your own remote work and your like work-life balance, which seems to be a lot more difficult right now? And
mm.
also, when we're looking to the future, a lot of tech companies have already announced, like Twitter, Facebook, and Google, that they will allow a lot more remote work from now on. Is Box going on the same direction?
Yeah, great questions. So your first question was about this work from home shift that we've all had to do as non-essential workers. So for me, it's been quite a wave. Like, I think at first it was kind of exciting. I was like, this is different, got me on my toes. Like, now I gotta adapt. And then after a while, I was like, this is harder than I thought. And then it kind of sinks in. And for me personally, I live back at home with my family. So I have two siblings that are both in high school. So, they're definitely going through it with their school and everything. And then my mom's around. So learning how to coexist with everyone has been a whole feat in itself too. So it's not just me I'm worrying about anymore, like waking up, going to work, dealing with everything at work, coming home, and knowing that there's designated family time. Now everything is kind of merged into one, like in the beginning my mom would like walk in to my Zoom meetings, I'm like, I'm working, like so it's been quite a shift because especially me personally, I've made a good boundary between what I do at home and what I do at work. So when I'm home, I don't do work. It's definitely my wind down time. And so now that it's 2 in 1, I've definitely had to rethink what that means for me. Excuse me. And so it's been hard, but I think a lot of it has brought this huge learning opportunity to what this kind of work looks like. And people go remote like fully, but that's also their decision to go fully remote. And so I've always wondered, like, I wonder how it is to just work from home all the time. And now we know whether you like it or not. And so Box has been really supportive, thankfully. It is a tech company, so everything is already in the cloud, as we know. Really easy to switch from the office to home. But I'd say Box has been really good about being strategic, about transparency. So, whenever there's COVID cases happening in different locations, they alert us. If a boxer happened to get one in another country, like, they definitely put everyone on lockdown right away. Thankfully, there hasn't been one that I know of in this area here in California of a boxer getting it. But they've actually allowed remote work until January 2021 as well. So we are in that tech company bandwagon of making it optional. So even if we do lift down shelter in place and we're able to come in person, they're going to do it in waves. The workers that need to come in will come in first, and then it'll kind of like release by org who comes in next. But it's optional. So it's a quote unquote work from anywhere that is an approved location. We can't just like go to another country and vacation and work at the same time. But it's optional. So it really gives people that ability to work at their comfort. So if if everything goes back to quote unquote normal and we still feel uncomfortable, we won't be, we won't get in trouble if we don't want to come in just yet. So it's great that Box is really supportive of all of this.
Totally. I wonder, thank you, Kelly. I wonder if in the future, this thing of like taking a vacation and working remotely will become a thing. And I just saw in the news that Estonia has created a new type of work visa. Is that you can come in and have a 1-year work visa in Estonia and just stay there working remotely. And they were predicting that this will be a trend in the future.
Whoa.
And I just want to say that I would be totally down to do
awesome.
that. So I know that now Box doesn't approve it, but I'm curious that maybe in the future this will become a thing.
Yeah, it's definitely brought up a lot of conversations around this new, like, what does work from home flexibility mean? Because a lot of people were already working from home at least once or twice a week. And, depending on their living situation. So now it's like, okay, what's the new minimum? Like, what can we do? Like, we've definitely tested the waters on what it is to work remotely, and it seems like we've upkept everything we've needed to do. So what does that mean for, the usual policy of coming in and when not to come in? So totally, I would love that, because I'm a very like free-spirited person. I would be anywhere and everywhere if I could. And if work can be flexible with that, that's awesome.
I mean, that is a challenge, right? Thinking about the time differences, I'm sure that's where it gets complicated, because Estonia's 10 hours ahead of California. And I think you'd have to be a night owl to want to work on that time. But it's, I'm totally going on a tangent, but it's been making me think a lot about kind of the way international education is going as well. So sorry, total tangent, but
no, keep going.
Just if we're going to have to be thinking about, like, if for whatever reason student mobility is limited during a specific time, and maybe airlines end up being more expensive from here out, who knows how the overall impact is going to be, then having countries do something like that, a work visa that's a little bit more flexible, means that there's more possibility for people who weren't able to pursue something like study abroad will still be able to get kind of a international, intercultural experience.
Yeah.
It's not, so that's super cool. Thanks for putting that on the radar, Bianca.
Yeah. and that's such a good point, because, with that topic and all of this work from home stuff going on because of COVID, like, it's prime time for all of that stuff. We definitely could not have made this shift as a society and as a world if, technology has not evolved to what it is now. So we should definitely think more on this on a global scale, because those are really good ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, doing a little bit of a shift, Sabrina, and moving away from Box and remote work. Well, maybe remote work's involved, but what are some of the things that you're really excited about, your career roadmap, so to speak, about your potential career future? What's the next milestone that you are currently trying to work on?
Yeah, so promotion always. And I think that just really stems from my passion to grow and to constantly be a student of whatever I'm doing and whatever I'm involved in. So it's something that I like to label myself as a student. I'm always here to learn. I'm always here to grow. And so, being in a career is no exception to that. So I definitely want to keep the trajectory going. So I guess my next goal would be a university recruiter, or maybe like a program manager. So like helping scale programs and think of new programs. And thankfully I've had the opportunity to touch some of that stuff, where like all the way from the strategy to like actually planning the whole program and the week and like what it looks like. So I've had the opportunity to touch all these things and know that this is compelling to me. I like seeing a problem and solving it, but also knowing that it draws dear to my heart with providing that value once again. So empowering students, thinking about like, okay, this is a great program, it scales, but like, what are the larger implications? Does it have like, does it support diversity and inclusion? Does it provide a good message? Is it branding? Is it more professional development overall? So really thinking about those themes as well is something I know I want to be a part of. And so wherever it helps me end up, I know that like I've done my work in something that is dear to my heart. So yeah.
And kind of bouncing off that, how far ahead do you kind of look when you are thinking about your career trajectory? Do you tend to have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, or does it kind of stick more maybe the next 2 or 3 years out?
Yeah. I'd say I have like general goals for like, you know, the increments of 10 years of my life. Because I find that whenever I do start to plan for something, let's say in a year, the great thing about life is everything that I've projected and like predicted about it doesn't end up happening. And I don't think that should be scary. You know, whether it's your professional life or your personal life, you know, a year ago I could not have guessed this had happened with COVID and like where I am in my career. So it just comes to show how much life evolves and, you know, our values do and how we're swayed by that. So I'd say I really do plan for maybe like 6 months because that's really all I have control over. And especially with how scrappy boxes specifically, not that it's a bad thing, it's just there's things changing and evolving all the time. And that's a super exciting space for me to be in because I feel like I'm catching things and running with it, right? And like making the best of the situation as I can. Um, so I think I lead thematically in my life. I know that I want to, you know, grow my career. I know that I want to live in another country. Like I know that I want to be able to like settle down eventually. So these are just my personal goals. And so I'm more motivated by possibly like my day to day than like, okay, this is a big goal and this is like the steps I have to take towards it. And I think it's a little unconventional in a way, not very solid framework, but it's what works for me because I know I'm resonating with what I feel compelled to and I gravitate towards. So I feel like if I follow that, like I'm always not going to regret what I end up deciding to do.
I don't think it's unconventional at all. I mean, maybe it's, yeah, I guess in a way it is technically, but I think I resonate with what you're saying in that it's, you make a plan and then it kind of flips over on its head when you weren't expecting. You're like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I find it interesting, the question that sometimes we get in interviews, right? That where do you plan to be in where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I've always stuck with the answer, like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I know what I want now.
Or, you know, I have ideas, like there's a couple things that may be in the crystal ball, but so I just wanted to address, I think you have a great way of also articulating how you look at it thematically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and also,
Oh, sorry. I don't think I heard that part.
oh, see you in Estonia.
Oh,
Because you said you want to live in another country.
Yeah, I gotta do my research on that now.
It's so funny. But and also what you said on 6 months, I love that. I think I have been doing that in my life as well, even with my college decision. And this just reminds me, as a side comment, I went to a women professional conference, and there was this woman, her name was Lisa Lambert, and she's the founder and CEO of Upward, which is like a women's supporting of executives, and it's a foundation, a nonprofit. And I remember she was saying, and she was talking about her own career path, and she said, when I was in high school, I sat down and I did my 40-year career plan.
Whoa, in high school?
And yes, and I was like, oh no. I'm too late already. And I found it so impressive. And I think I also take the same approach. You know, we going thematically about things and just going with the same vision, right? And always going places that will serve our own purpose. And when we're talking about purpose, one of my favorite questions to ask in podcasts is a little bit about your own why and just more existential. So when I think you seem very passionate about professional development and education and student empowerment. But when we frame the question in another direction, what problem in the world are you most passionate about solving?
Oh yeah, I'm super passionate about all this stuff. And it reminds me now of something I said in not college, high school. Now that we're talking about high school, that someone was like, what do you want to major in college, you know? And at the time I didn't know because I'm in high school. I'm like, I have time, right? And my biggest answer was just like, I want to keep giving back. Like, I just want to give back. And people are like, but how? And I'm like, I don't know yet, but I'm going to give back, like, somehow. So I see that in a lot of different ways in my life, and especially in my career, because that's something that I spend so much time on. You know, we're working all the time, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And so that's a big chunk of our life. And so if I can constantly make that connection between, am I giving back? Am I, you know, like handing things off better than I found it, that gives me a lot of purpose. And so whether it's, you know, providing these opportunities to students, or like helping spearhead this big diversity and inclusion program that we run yearly, which is called the Fox Business Fellowship. So it's geared towards students in underrepresented backgrounds to learn about tech, especially the non-technical side of tech, and this huge question of like, but I'm not an engineer, like, where's my space in the tech industry? And it's like, actually a lot of it. Not like, not even more than half of all the people, especially at Box, are like, they are non-technical. So the business part, like the things that actually run the company, of course the product, but also the people behind it that make it happen. So I think really just pushing the message. Sorry, I'm a very thematic person, very big picture, so I might not get too granular with these questions. But I mean, now more than ever, recently, the past couple of weeks, it's like, how can I be a better ally? How can I be a better activist? How can I stand up for things I believe in? You know, and so thankfully, I've gotten the chance to do that a lot at work. So Box is doing something called the Ben Allyship Circle. So Ben is our employee resource group called the Black Excellence Network. So it's for all people that identify Black and their allies. And they've spearheaded like an allyship circle. So talking about how to be anti-racist and like all the resources we need. And like within the first week, there was this whole reference doc of like things to watch, things to read, things to listen to, like all of this stuff, where to donate. And so for me, if I can like be that one person that makes a stand and can be behind a company that believes so, and encourages it, like that gives me a lot of purpose. So yeah, just speaking on that a little bit. Let's see, my why is I'm also thinking about, for some reason, sustainable living.
It all fits in, right? I mean,
I have a lot of whys. So recently I've just making the switch to like plastic free, which is something I've always been really curious about. This is super random, but you know, like from my toothbrush to like, you know, our sponges that we wash the dishes with, like things that reduce the use of plastic, and like telling people about that. What else? I feel like I'm just going on a tangent now. Please bring me back to earth.
I think you've touched on a lot of really excellent things. While you remain thematic and kind of your core is to give back, you touched on a lot of really important themes, to go with thematic.
Yes.
To you and also to the world. And I mean, yeah, definitely diversity, equity, and inclusion, and focusing on being a good ally to Black people is a big theme in this moment. But also, I love how you also touch about the sustainability piece, because those are all things, and they come from really, really big problems that are so hard to think about sometimes, but and it's important how to figure out how we can incorporate them. And I think that having something at your core that tells you, I need to give back in some way, and that's my purpose, and being able to use that as kind of an avenue for how you get involved in those initiatives is really great. So
totally. I always think about it as like, of course, as we said, these are huge concepts, you know, like so like far off, so systematic. So it's like, if I can as one person make this change, if I can give back a little bit, imagine all these other people who think the same way, and like how that's just a ripple effect of hopefully positive change. So it gives me energy, and then it also in turn, like all this inner work helped me like give that to others. So that's always my why in general with anything, you know, whether it's my personal life or like, you know, how I can be more mindful of, you know, an underrepresented like group, and like how I can be a resource to them and an advocate for them. You know, it all makes the world go round, and it's like one person at a time. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think that that was really inspiring. Bianca's nodding, so she agrees.
Yeah, totally.
I am.
And speaking of, but going along with the theme of giving back, so to speak, since you work with a lot of university recruiters, do you have any advice that you would give to students who just graduated and are now looking for a job in kind of this weird time?
Yeah. And that reminds me a lot of our questions earlier about my own journey. And it is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hard. It's hard to have like this limbo of questions that you're sitting in and not knowing, you know, what's in reach, what's going to come within the next week for you in your life. And it does seem like a huge thing to think about, because it's like, okay, this decision is going to affect maybe my next year or so, or like the trajectory of my career. Like there's so many things to think about. But if there's one thing that I've learned being on the other side, it's people are genuinely here to help. And there's just so much happening in the background that candidates could not ever know about. Like there's so many business decisionings happening that are not in our control. There's budgeting stuff happening, there's referrals happening. And so while I remember applying to all of these things and being rejected to 90% of them, like I can't even imagine what happened in the back, but of course, all I saw was the rejection. And so that, of course, got the better of me, and I'm sure a lot of other students. But I think coming back to the why is like, it just seems easier said than done, but like always going back to your why will help a lot in these situations, because that'll keep you grounded and, you know, more direct on a path towards something that resonates with you, rather than forcing something or like letting the bigger details get the better of you. And so just trusting in the process is a huge part of it. And I know that's advice given all around, but as someone from, you know, the other side of the recruiting process, especially right after college, just trusting in the process. And it can feel like, but I knew this was for me, like this was meant for me. There's a lot of other opportunities, and it doesn't mean you're not gonna like get the same experience. Like you're just gonna see it in a different way, and you'll probably still learn some of the more valuable things that like help you through your day-to-days, such as how to communicate with people around you, how to project manage, how to be self-motivated in like a responsibility that you have. So yeah, that's my answer to that. I hope I answered it.
I love that. I think a lot about how this job hunting process is going to look like. It's about self-motivation.
Yeah.
So I think that's really great advice. And also on knowing that there's a lot more going on in the background besides just the rejection letter, right? We focus on
Yeah.
the information we're receiving, but I'm sure there's a lot more happening there. And again, going back to our why, one of my own passions is gender equality. And you're a woman working in a tech company, and we know there's a huge leadership gap for women in tech generally. So what are your thoughts on it, and how do you think women can contribute to break the glass ceiling?
Yeah, such a big question. And thankfully, the first thing that comes to mind is there are quite a few women leaders at Box that I look up to very much. So in a way, like it's empowering to have that within Box, but I do know that I've read up a lot on specifically the tech industry and how exclusive it can be sometimes, and then a lot of that is understanding how it started. So, the first pioneers of the Silicon Valley were men, typically white men. And, a lot of the people that fund these startups that become big tech giants, such as like venture capitalists, are also white men. And so understanding that this is a systemic thing, and really just acknowledging that. That was a big part. And I know it's quite upsetting sometimes to think about how these systems are rooted by so much history and so many decisions and so much, you know, like people of that caliber. But for me, it's really about showing up and not being apologetic about it. And so, especially as a woman, understanding that these things are happening because they probably do identify with each other. White men trying to start up a company are going to go to white men who can invest in their company. And so there's actually a really great book that I read called Growtopia that specifically talks about diversity and inclusion within tech, and really, really highly recommend it to anyone listening into this. But essentially, again, breaking this glass ceiling, as you guys said, right? So giving you the cold hard facts, learning the history, but knowing how we can show up. And so for me, a big passion of mine, again, as I said, is diversity and inclusion. But I've sometimes found that's a little bit of a buzzword, or at least now it's becoming a buzzword, as in it's this hot flashy word, but we don't really know what it's doing for the metrics, or how it's representing and bringing inclusivity. And so for me, diversity without structural transformation is simply not living up to diversity and inclusion. So we can say oh, diverse, diversity, yes, but if we're leaving that out, the inclusion part, then nothing's really happening. And so I really challenge people, especially if you're early in your career listening to this, asking what these companies that you're interviewing for are doing about it. And so at Box, we're lucky enough to have all these employee resource groups we call Women in Tech. So this group of us spotlighting women, bringing in women speakers from other tech companies, really learning how they built their career. Because I think even if we want to get larger, and I'm definitely a victim of it, gaslighting. So, as a woman, we feel or we're made to feel we're not as qualified even if we are. And so sometimes I'll be explaining something and I'm does that make sense? Do you get that? Did I explain it well? When I very well know that I did, and so not caving into the little things like that, and really just taking a stand, and self-advocating is a big part. And it's something that I'm still learning, especially early in my career, is how do I advocate for what I've done, the impact that it's had, and where it can take me and this team. And so definitely get some women mentors in your life that can uplift you and give you their experience, can teach you how to advocate. That's a huge thing. But also just owning up to it. We're women in tech. And that's great. It's perspective that a man can't bring in, or for me, it's a first generation Asian American perspective that someone else who isn't can't bring in. And so including all of these different perspectives is the bottom line. And it really is what's going to make it a diverse workspace, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love what you say about the different perspective. It always brings, it always reminds me of this McKinsey report from 2018 that says that gender diverse teams are 21% more likely to outperform their peers. Mm-hmm. And I think that is just, it's amazing to me that they could prove that with statistics, because we always have known it. And I think it's also great advice that you should find women mentors in your career and look up to them and show up. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Sabrina, you've given, I think, us and our audience so much to chew on. It's been a really fantastic conversation today, and so much fun. we're wrapping things up, but we do have one more question for the podcast today. You kind of, well, you almost answered. I'll explain why. We're wondering if there's anything that you're reading right now or listening to or watching that might be furthering your learning, or it could be relaxing, either way, that you think other people should take a look at. And I made a note that you recommend Growtopia. That's something that's actually been on my list. So
so good. So
moved
good.
up, like, oh, okay. There's credibility to it. But what are you reading now?
Yeah, so +1 to Growtopia, actually +100 if you can. It was very helpful for me because I read it once I got hired at Box. I felt like that was a good read because I wanted to know what I was getting myself into, but also to understand the workspace as a Silicon Valley, as this tech space, and what I'm going to be up to, what kind of work I'm going to be needing to help in, and the kind of just everything in general. Sorry. As in what I'm reading, I've been going like off and on and like alternating between like biographies and just fiction in general. I've always been a big bookworm, and so I think having that, like, okay, reality, this person is building up themselves, they're amazing, and then, oh, this is fun, like this is something that's like never gonna happen, but it's fun to read. That kind of give me some momentum. So lately I've read like Michelle Obama's Becoming. I've read Ali Wong's Dear Girls. She's a Asian American from the Bay, actually, who's a big comedian now. And then some other off books I've read are like The Girl on the Train, and now I'm reading one called Kafka on the Shore, which is just super metaphorical and just out of this world weird, but something that like gives me a little bit of energy. In terms of listening, I do love podcasts a lot. So this is actually kind of like a little bit of my dream. So thank you for making this happen. I've always wondered what it was
Thank
like
you.
to be on a podcast. I think a good starter would be, if anyone knows like Tim Ferriss, my partner recommends that one a lot. He interviews just anyone and everyone that he's curious about and asks questions that genuinely interest him. So it's not very curated to get something out of the person. It's just mainly like what he thinks his viewers would ask this person. So basic life stuff. I personally listen to Getting Curious with JVN. So JVN is from the Netflix series Queer Eye, but he's actually way more educated than people think he is. So interviewing, politicians, activists, all these people that have done amazing work. And so talking about like, history, like US history, like what's happening in the world right now, how to vote, like all these different topics that I've always wanted to devote time and learning about, but that was always a great start. So I recommend that one. I also wanted to plug in that Yale is doing a free online course on the science of well-being globally. So it's free. It talks about the science of happiness and then how to actually build habits for yourself that are sustainable in the long run, that work for you. So that's been like my little nerd thing on the side. And in terms of like the anti-racist work that I'm doing right now to be a listener and a learner and just absorbing all this information, I'm a big visual learner, so I've been watching a lot of movies and documentaries on it because I feel like that's a really immersive way for me to learn. So if you want to get kickstarted on anti-racist practices now, like I recommend watching 13th on Netflix. Just Mercy is a movie that is free for the month of June across platforms. So whether you have Prime or YouTube or Vudu, I think, it's free. And yeah, those are a couple of random recommendations that I have.
It's a lot of recommendations. That's awesome.
Sorry.
No,
all the knowledge.
It's great. We'll definitely include those in the show notes. And I think that'll be great for everyone to hear. Mm-hmm. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much. This is Happy to make your dreams come true. It's been a real blast.
Thank you for having me. This was very fun. I hope I've, again, to the Y, provided value in its purest form. It is very thematic, but I do feel like it's quite a big guiding principle in my life. And the great thing is everyone can just cater it to their own core values. So yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
I myself learned a lot from you right now, so I'm sure the audience will as well. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you guys so much.
And that wraps up today's podcast episode. Thanks everyone for listening. And remember that you can find Leverage Your Potential on our blog site or wherever podcasts are found. Save Apple Podcasts. They're taking a really long time, but definitely Spotify. So thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. Episodes are posted weekly and can be found on our blog at blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Make it a great day.